Before we get into our discussion, it's important for us to state that the Higher Education Reform Experts South Africa is a European Union-funded project. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of our guests and our guests alone. They do not represent or reflect the official policy or position of HERESA or the member institutions and organizations by whom our guests are employed. Unless otherwise stated, HERESA does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, view, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in the HERESA podcast. Welcome to the Higher Education Reform Experts South Africa, or HERESA podcast, where we will have engaging, stimulating, and hopefully worthwhile conversations around issues, themes, and concerns in higher education. My name is Kanya Mjali, and I am the Media Liaison Officer for Technological Higher Education Network South Africa, or THENSA, which is a coalition of technology-focused institutions mainly based in South Africa. I will be the host of this conversation, but in future we will have a variety of hosts featured on the HERESA podcast. For those of you who aren't in the know, HERESA is an Erasmus Plus capacity building project for higher education, which THENSA founded in partnership with Obriel Global Observatory in Spain and the South African Qualifications Authority, or SAQA. As a pilot project, which will take place over the next 3 years in THENSA's member institutions, HERESA seeks to build a network of higher education reform experts in South Africa, modeled on the Higher Education Reform Experts, or HERE, model in the EU neighborhood. HERESA aims to strengthen and revitalize teaching and learning strategies in the areas of entrepreneurship of teaching and learning, work-integrated learning, competence-based learning, and curriculum development for the fourth industrial revolution. This edition of the HERESA podcast is part of our Communities of Practice series, which focuses on the 4 areas mentioned beforehand: entrepreneurship of teaching and learning, work-integrated learning, competence-based learning, and curriculum development for the fourth industrial revolution. Our previous episode provided an introduction to what a community of practice is and how we plan to implement it as part of our mandate here at HERESA. Joining us today to kickstart what I can guarantee will be a very interesting discussion on the entrepreneurship of teaching and learning is Professor Keolebogile Motaung, who is an entrepreneur, biomedical scientist, professor, and director of technology transfer and innovation at the Durban University of Technology. Now, if I were to sit here and recite Professor Motaung's CV line by line, we'd be here until the end of time. So I'm just going to highlight some of her achievements just to give you a sense of the powerhouse we're talking to today. Professor Motaung has 23 years of experience in higher education. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Global Health Biotech and president of the African Tissue Engineering and Regenerative Medicine International Society. As a professor, research scientist, and entrepreneur, she trains her postgraduate students on how to not only conduct research and become scientists, but also on how to become an entrepreneur, which is central to our discussion today. In her capacity as CEO of Global Health Biotech, she has developed a natural anti-inflammatory ointment named La Africa Soother from medicinal plants, which help to relieve muscle and joint aches. Professor Motaung has her D.Tech in Biomedical Technology from Tshwane University of Technology in conjunction with the University of California. She also has her M.Tech in Biomedical Technology, again from TUT. She has also obtained her B.Tech in Biomedical Technology at what was previously known as Technikon Witwatersrand, while also graduating with her National Diploma in Medical Technology at Technikon Pretoria. She is regarded as the heart and soul of entrepreneurship at DUT, as well as a champion for bridging the gap between science and business. I almost have to take a break after that CV, but Professor Motaung, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the HERESA podcast.
Thank you so much, Kenya, for inviting me.
Of course. So I like to start these conversations with our experts with a question that might strike one as obvious, but just for your field of expertise and for your passion, what, in your opinion, is entrepreneurship?
For me, Entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is someone who wants to solve a problem that is already existing. An entrepreneur is not all entrepreneurs are business people, but not all business people are entrepreneurs. And that's what one could see the differences between being an entrepreneur and being a business person. An entrepreneur, you solve a problem that is already there, problem solving. And then a business, you can just run a business the way you wanted to run it. And hence, I always make a differences between the two. That not business people can be an entrepreneur, but entrepreneurs can be the business people. And for me, this is one of the things that is very important, so that the people must be able to see the differences between the two. Quite often, people always think that they always put the two together or mixing the two together, thinking that if you've got a business, when you run a business, they're thinking that you are an entrepreneur. And honestly, it's not like that. And hence, I always try to make sure that one needs to explain to the people that this whole issue things does not really work like that. And hence, I always said many universities offer entrepreneurship as an add on their program. Some through hands-on mirrors, and others by touching tools such as business canvas model or either a business proposal. But the reality remains that entrepreneur as a lifestyle goes beyond those canvases that one can really talk about. So let me just pause there and just to show the differences in terms of the entrepreneur and the business.
You mentioned a number of interesting things, but I think what stands out for me is this idea that entrepreneurs can be business people, but not all business people are entrepreneurs. Could you unpack that for some people who might be thinking, but I run a business, doesn't that make me an entrepreneur?
Okay, let me just put it that way. An entrepreneurship major focuses less on broad business principles, but more on practical, real-world application. And hence, you can't taught an entrepreneur in theory. It must be a practical oriented. On the other hand, even at the university, it is difficult for those lecturers who are not an entrepreneur and think that they can teach it. Remember, it's the same thing like somebody can say to me, I must go and teach accountants. I'm not an accountant. How am I going to teach that? And I think this is one of the things, is a hardcore, and we need to understand the reality that not everyone at the university can teach entrepreneur, and then exactly how the entrepreneur could be taught. That is why I try always to say entrepreneur cannot be like put at the business school and somebody from the business school thinking that you can teach it and then end up teaching theory, because it's more practical, real world application.
Right. This community of practice is centered on the entrepreneurship of teaching and learning. And I think you mentioned something very interesting about the practical aspect of being an entrepreneur. Do you believe that entrepreneurship is something that can be taught, or is it something that you're born with? Because we have this nature versus nurture argument. Can you teach someone the tools of being an entrepreneur, or do they have to have this innate ability to just go for it?
It depends how you want to look at it. Someone can say you're either born with it, like somebody will say leadership, you're born with it, management, you go and study. And then with an entrepreneur, I can also say you also have to be having it in your mind that you wanted to do it. And I'll give you an example with the kind of students that I have already trained. In terms of what's supposed to be happening here, we need to give them skills, especially for those that's already got those aspirations to see themselves as entrepreneurs. They need skills, because as an entrepreneur, you need a lot of skills so that you'll be able to survive. But now, even if we can say you don't want to be an entrepreneur, but I'm going to give you a design thinking as a course, just to understand. Nothing wrong with that, because you can apply that design thinking in your working environment should you want to go and start working somewhere else. But If you go with the entrepreneurial route in terms of the design thinking, that is something, a tool that you can be able to apply it in your business or in your entrepreneurial career that you wanted to follow. Just a good example that I've just recently noticed. I had students that they were doing projects. Some of their projects, I have actually turned their project into a startup. Some of them, they told me straight that they are not interested for me to turn their project into the startup, but they were quite happy that they have learned the tool, which was the design thinking. They've learned the technique, they've learned the skills. So that's why now one has to discover that not everybody can be an entrepreneur. But if there are certain skills that we want to teach the students, we must not say we are only going to focus on only those students that want to be an entrepreneur. Even those that don't want to be an entrepreneur, they can benefit a lot from those skills because they can end up applying those skills that they have learned in their working environment wherever they wanted to go.
At Benso, we have our online entrepreneurship program, which we engineered in partnership with Munster Technological University, of which you were a big part. And there was that emphasis on you may not have the spirit of an entrepreneur, but adopting the skills, those entrepreneurship skills, is important in your working life. And I'm curious to know how you think having an entrepreneurial spirit can help those students who, for example, as you mentioned, may have been taught the skills, but think, you know what, I don't really have it in me to have a startup.
Remember, there are certain skills that, as an entrepreneur, they will teach you those skills. But on the other hand, those skills that are not necessarily meaning that they are for you to be an entrepreneur. Those skills, you can also end up using them should you wanted not to be an entrepreneur, because not everyone in the university can really be the entrepreneur. And I think that's one of the things that you must always have that in the back of the mind, not to be end up forcing that everyone can be an entrepreneur. Not everyone cannot be. But if there are certain skills that is very important, I can just give an example of certain skills. I mean, if you want to be an entrepreneur, they need a certain skills of communication. That communication, you're going to communicate to your clients, you're going to communicate to the funders. But again, even if you are not an entrepreneur, you still need the communication skills, as an example. That's what I just wanted to know. So the other thing, whether you like it or not, you need to know how you can pitch your idea. Even if you are not an entrepreneur, you are working in whatever as a CEO of a certain company, you must also be able to pitch the idea of that company. So that also is a skill that you will definitely have to learn it, irrespective of whether you were an entrepreneur or not. On the other hand as well, in terms of, just to give an example, that's what I'm saying, I don't want always to say these skills are, you also need a sales skills. As an entrepreneur, you will need those sales skills. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, you need that sales skills. For in case you're gonna work in sales marketing, you need that for sales skills. So you understand, hence I'm saying with communication, whether you're gonna be an entrepreneur or not, you need the skills, because it's who, the what, and the how. Whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you're not, but you need to know how do you communicate it. On the other hand, it's also the way you communicate, whether you are an entrepreneur or not. You need to understand whether it is a verbal or is a paraverbal. You need to understand. You need to sell everything. You provide service to the potential customers. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, you're working for whatever companies, you still want to talk to people. You still want to talk to people. So you need that, you need the ability to learn, and then you also have to focus, whether you are an entrepreneur or you're not an entrepreneur, but you need to focus. So you need to understand those are kind of things that I always said. Those are skills, whether you are or you're not, you need to understand them. On the other hand, one could also say, you need to understand the business strategy. Somebody will say, why must I understand the business strategy? Because I'm not going to be an entrepreneur. Of course, you're going to work in a certain company where you're going to be an MD of that company, or you're going to be a CEO of that company. But you need to understand their business strategy of that company. So you could say that why it was important for this online to answer that. We don't want to say this is only for the entrepreneur, especially when it comes to skills. The skills, you can learn it and be able to apply it in the working environment even if you're not an entrepreneur.
I'd like to talk a little bit about risk, because people like to say that you need to have the ability to take risks as an entrepreneur, but I often feel like we ignore the fact that risk doesn't happen in a vacuum. The risk that an entrepreneur adopts doesn't just affect them, but it could affect their partners or spouses, children, relatives, their creditworthiness, and just about everything else that characterizes adult life. When you are talking to your students and they are very keen on starting a business, how do you discuss risk with them in a way that is relevant to their everyday lives?
Thank you for that. When, as an entrepreneur, when people always said you need to learn to take risk, there is risk, but you must also be intelligent enough. Don't be so stupid, even things that you know that is not working. And I think this is sometimes where the people always make a confusion between taking a risk on what you wanted to do and also acting very ignorant, because you can take risk and calculated risk and be able to see. Let me give you a typical example of what you wanted to do. If you want to start a business and then you don't have a market, you can't go ahead and develop a product and it says, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to develop this product and I will sell it. I'm taking risk. That for me is being stupid. You can't go and develop a product where you don't know who is the market. And I think this is where sometimes one needs to explain what kind of a risk is that, a calculated risk. Because you cannot go and brand a product beautiful and says, no, I'm taking risk. That for me, I always say, you're not taking risk. You've been stupid and wasting money because you don't know whether this product that you are busy manufacturing, you are busy branding, do you have a market for that? So one needs to understand it. Of course, you can take risk where you have the market and then the product, something happens and then your business is not going on. That for me is completely different. But hence I'm saying there are the different kind of risk, and one has to calculate, is this the one that I'm going to take or not? And again, sometimes one can also see, I don't know how many of us as entrepreneurs do we understand the so-called STEM. Nobody tells us a lot about it, and the people don't really talk about it. I mean, we have just discovered now with COVID. But if you knew when you build on your strategy in a company as an entrepreneur, you'll be able to incorporate this. And this can be able to get help. When one talk about personally P, which stands for political, you know, when you run a business, any political, whether they change a party from whatever to party with your business can also be affected. Some yes, some not. They're also environmental. It depends again with the kind of business that you are running. There are also legal for L, which is done for legal. And then there are also, the social that can also. But if one could have just embedded this person in their company when they start or in their strategy, one could have understood what would have done during COVID. And currently at the moment, you can ask yourself, how many entrepreneurs are they using the blue ocean strategy in their company? A lot of us, we don't. We always prefer the red ocean strategy. But because of, again, we don't understand, that is why we end up having all those kind of risks that one has already been taken, and then it becomes a problem. And that's also one of the reasons why I said also, I don't want to say the risk, one has just to be very careful how one defines risk. Because if you define risk and somebody's doing something that is completely, really idiot, then you can't say there was also a risk that you took. That for me is one of the things that one has to be very careful.
You are an entrepreneur, and I think it perhaps lends your teaching a degree of real world experience. If possible, could you perhaps tell us what are some of the challenges that you have faced in your capacity as CEO of Global Health Biotech, or just generally as an entrepreneur? What are some of the most challenging things that you have come across?
One of the most challenging things that I've come across, it was more of funding, especially at the biotech space. And as an entrepreneur, you have to persevere, because if you don't persevere, you're going to lose hope. And to complete those applications, I mean, like nowadays, whenever there is a call for funding, whether it's TIA, DSI, whenever BTI, whenever I see a call for funding, I'm telling you, I jump into that kind, because that is an opportunity for me to see if I can get money or not. Those were one of the things that was real challenges was funding. But again, what I've also learned, when you enter into this competition and you get money from those competitions, don't go and buy beef or nice bag or nice shoes. Just use that money towards your business. Quite often you hear the entrepreneur says to me, no, I've got money, I want to go pay demo, I want to go and thank myself. You can't thank yourself if you're not having a profit. That is also, then you say, I'm taking risk. That's not taking risk, that's being stupid and being immature. Those are the kind of things that we need to talk about them. So whatever amount of money that I used to get, I have used that money towards global health. Because I knew, as a matter of fact, that I'm in the biotech space. And to run a biotech space as a Black female is not easy. Because a biotech product, it needs to be tested. There are so many things that you need to go through in terms of testing them. And that was one of the things that for me, it was very important that I save each and every money. I guess it was also coming from my background, that I cannot just take a product and put it there in the market or put it there in the shelves without being tested. I have to make sure that it is well tested before it can go there. So the challenges was just more funding. But I must also say, even if the challenges are there for funding, some of our entrepreneurs, they are lazy just to apply for funding. They want to get money, like money must just walk to them. Money won't walk to you. You need to sit down and read and understand your business. You don't have to go and get someone next door and say, may you kindly write me a business plan. You cannot pay someone else to write your business plan. It's not her or his business plan, is your company. So you need to understand. But having said that, there are also challenges with those application forms as well, because they can also be very intimidating, especially where for those who never wrote a lot of grant. Remember, some of us, it was easy because of coming from the research background, where we used to write grant proposal. So then it becomes kind of easy to take that risk of writing all this grant, if I can call it, if it's a risk. But if you don't, it's really going to intimidate you, because those application forms, they can literally intimidate a person. I've seen them if you don't understand. And again, if you also, as an entrepreneur, you also don't have a mentor. That was also one of the things that started for me. It was also a little bit of a challenge when I started. I never had a mentor. I had a mentor who didn't understand my business. And that didn't really work. It didn't really sit well with me together with him, because he didn't understand my business. Those were the kind of things that I've learned, that if you really have to have a mentor, get somebody who understands your business, not somebody who doesn't understand your business, because you're still going to fight. So I ended up having a mentor eventually, which is extremely good, and also been grateful again, being mentored by my supervisor when I was busy doing my PhD at the University of California, who assisted me a lot in my company as well, based on that background and based on exposing me and based on promoting me on whatever things that I was doing. And also, one of the things that was become a challenge, but I ended up overcoming them, when I received the female bio grant that I received, and then it was also another business opportunity to go to Finland. I've really utilized that in terms of the business language, the business concept, because I was coming from the scientific background, not having any background in terms of the business. So I ended up going and learned a lot in Finland, and I really didn't take anything very lightly there. I took everything that I could learn. On the other hand, as well, which I can share, that becomes as an entrepreneur, whenever there are this kind of courses, continue, even myself, whenever there's a design thinking, even if I've done design thinking with Stanford, when I see an opportunity that they are offering it, I still attend. So anything that I can see, it can build me up, I attend, I keep on attending, and I keep on attending.
I'm so glad you mentioned funding, and I'm so glad you mentioned the inaccessibility of some of these funding applications, because I think for some young entrepreneurs, they can be intimidated by the prospect of having to apply for funding. And you mentioned that your research background helped you to some extent, but even then, you weren't entirely familiar with the business language to a T. Besides doing courses, besides trying to find a mentor, which if you're not in an academic space or in a space like it can be challenging, what else can young entrepreneurs do to access funding if they don't have the sort of background that enables them to find these forms accessible?
Thank you so much. One of the things that they must always, as an entrepreneur, you need to have a mentor, especially for those one that they know that it might be challenging for them to apply with those applications that I've just mentioned to you. They need to have a mentor. That mentor will be able to assist them. But when you choose a mentor, you must be able to work well with the person. And then also, one of the things as well when you choose a mentor, you must always, I always make this as an example and the people always laugh. Is this person that you are choosing to mentor you, is her or he happy in his or her own career? If the person is not happy, why would you want to choose that person? Because then it's going to be a problem with you and the person when you have to start mentoring. And I think we don't talk about this kind of things. I mean, it's exactly choosing, Kanya, you want to do masters and you go and choose a professor and then at a certain university and says, oh my God, I hate being doing what I'm doing. And this person is going to supervise you. Now you start asking the question, oh my God, why did I brought myself into this? This person is not happy with what he or she is doing. But I'm talking from experience. But this person is going to supervise you. Now you start asking yourself a question. Is this right or not? So you have to be very careful. If somebody is not, or somebody complain a lot about working environment, run away from that. So you need to choose somebody who shares your professional outlook and perhaps has even accomplished the goals you hope to achieve, who will understand your business. Find someone who will introduce you to other important content so that you can be here. And pick someone who can really answer some of your questions. And I think this is one of the things that sometimes we don't talk about it, and because of mentoring. And mentoring is something that for me, it is very crucial that how you choose that kind of a person. Somebody that you can set goals. You've got a short-term, long-term, and medium-term goals. So you don't have to choose someone who says, I'm an entrepreneur myself, but I hate it. But you want this person to mentor you. And you start complaining about, oh my God, COVID has made my business to go down, but you want this person to mentor you. How is this person going to mentor you if this person has already got this lot of negativity around herself or himself? So for me, and I think this is what is happening, most of our mentees, they actually don't understand how to choose the mentors. And at the end of the day, they end up fighting and they end up don't want to see their mentors. It's exactly the same like students that have been supervised at the university. I've heard a lot of students say, I don't want to see my supervisor. I don't. That woman or that man has made my life hell. And you really don't want to be like that when you have supervised or mentored a student. You still want the students to come back to you. As a mentor, you still want that to come back to you as a mentee and says, you know what, my company is doing well, I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, or how can you also be able to assist? That's what I usually say, the contract between the mentor and the mentee, it is very important so that everybody understands exactly what is their goal.
Just one last thing on this particular topic, and then I think we can move on to discussing the communities of practice for entrepreneurship. But what other resources would you recommend young entrepreneurs access to improve their chances at getting funding or just to better themselves as entrepreneurs?
We do have the resources where you have to attend some of those workshops for grant writing, boot camps that we also offer for grant writing. And I'm glad with the online one, Unit 6 as well, they also talk about grant writing. So we started to start talking about that so that the entrepreneur can start attending all those courses and all those workshops, especially to equip themselves. And on the other hand, nothing really stop them after they wrote a grant and they can give it to someone else to say, please read this grant and see whether it makes sense or not. Because I used to say, after I wrote a grant and I gave it to my daughter who's a journalist, if my daughter can say, she doesn't understand it, I start again, because then it means there is a problem. I must not use the word, oh my God, you're not a scientist, you won't be able to understand. It makes sense. That is why you don't understand. If she doesn't understand, I must go back and write it in a manner that she'll be able to understand. Because remember, this grant that you usually write it for the business, not most of them that read the grants are scientists. Some of them, they are non-scientists, but they are business people that understand how the business proposal needs to be written, like talking about the market, talking about the value proposition, talking about the client, talking about going to the market. Talking about all those kind of things. So you need to understand it. And hence, I usually also say, when you are a scientist, when you're going to pitch, don't go and use your academic pitch. There's a difference between academic pitch and the difference between a business pitch. Hence, it is very important to understand those two things together. But we do give programs, and they must continue attending those programs. Whether it's DUT, it's not DUT, anywhere where they see that there is a call for grant writing, they must attend, because then it will be an opportunity for them to be able to learn a lot.
Thank you for that very valuable piece of advice. So I want to talk more about your position as chair for the Community of Practice for Entrepreneurship of Teaching and Learning. What previous experiences, if any, have you had with the Community of Practice outside of HERESA?
Thank you for that question. I guess for me, I'm really honored and grateful for being the chair. And I guess because of my experience, at least I know what works, what didn't work, how I've overcome them. And I always say to the people, at least I'm not talking about a dream that didn't come true. I talk about I had a dream, like Martin Luther King, that one day America will have a black president, and it happens. I'm also had a dream that one day I'll have a company, Global Health Biotech. So as that, it really needs somebody. For me, I always said it needs somebody who understands the landscape. Not only theory as a lecturer, but understand the landscape of entrepreneurship, so that you'll be able to assist what is working, what is not working. And also, we must not be shy away that you don't understand as a lecturer. Having a PhD, being a professor does not necessarily make you an entrepreneur. And I think people need to understand that. You can teach entrepreneur even if you don't have a master's, but based on your experience, the students can learn a lot more than that. I always say, I'm not saying PhD, you have to have it when you are a lecturer, but certain programs, they will see that perhaps somebody with the experience in that can really assist a lot in terms of that. So as COP, Community of Practice, Teaching and Learning, I can really say for entrepreneur that, there is absolutely no disadvantage of implementing this COP to assist teaching and learning for entrepreneurs. It's actually in the more advantage. But what is important is to make sure that who are those people that are going to teach and implement entrepreneurship. They must understand it, and they must have experience and knowledge of it, so that they are not going to end up teaching theory, because entrepreneurship is a practical subject. As I've already indicated and mentioned before, that it focuses less on broad business principles, but more on practical real-world application, such as problem solving. So I will say, really, somebody might be thinking that everybody can just be that. But for me, you need to understand the landscape, understand entrepreneur very well.
Why do you believe teaching and learning for entrepreneurship is so important? We've touched on this throughout this conversation, but just for the South African landscape, you mentioned the fact that certain institutions tend to treat entrepreneurship as an add-on. Why is it important to tailor curricula for entrepreneurship?
For me, if we really wanted to do it right, we need to have a degree, like kind of an undergraduate degree, whether it's a 3-year or 4 years, in entrepreneurship, whatever they can call it, where really we can emphasize mainly on entrepreneurship. And also, I'll tell you why I'm saying, and I'm stressing it, quite often in the university, they always have this. As a lecturer, they will say to a lecturer, you know what, you don't have enough workload. And then you will teach entrepreneur. And I think this is where the problem lies. course. Immediately they give you that, then it's kind of an add-on. It's not like they've given you that so that you will be able to teach it. So you have been given this subject because you didn't have enough on your plate to teach. Now they give you this subject. But truly speaking, is really, entrepreneur cannot be taught the way it has been taught. It really needs somebody who understands it, and then also understand exactly how the curriculum needs to look like. If you really look at mostly the curriculum development, they need to make sure that they develop the modules that will provide students with both theoretical foundation and hands-on practical learning method, rather than only the theory. But if you give it to someone else who doesn't understand, he end up giving those business canvas model and thinking that this is how they teach entrepreneur, business plan, and thinking that they're teaching entrepreneur. And meanwhile, it is not actually. They are not teaching entrepreneur. They are just giving you a theory of something. Some of they will also tell you that it can be embedded in their curriculum. And to be honest, embedding that if it's not standardized in the university, it's also not going to work, because each and every faculty will do whatever they wanted to do because of this entrepreneur thing, even if they said it's embedded, but it's not standardized. And then faculties will have different levels of people, centers, and engagement. And then at the end of the day, because everyone can do what they want to do, there was going to be that lack of inter-faculty collaboration, because everybody wanted to do. And almost the university, everybody wants to work in solo. Everyone is best for whatever they are doing. So as I'm saying, and I will always repeat that, we really need to look at this in a manner that it must not be an add-on subject. It must be something that we encourage, that if you don't know how to teach it, again, nothing wrong to say to the dean to say, no, don't give me this subject, I won't be able to teach. It's exactly the same thing like me. If I had to go and teach, I'm a molecular biologist, I can teach molecular biology, I can teach chemistry, I can teach anatomy and physiology. And then they said, okay, this semester, Professor Mutang, we don't have enough subject. We need a lecturer who can teach statistics. You will teach it. Why must I say yes? So it's exactly what is happening with entrepreneur. It's exactly. They don't take it seriously like a real subject that must be saying no. So I think we need now to take this like, if you take anatomy and physiology as a real core subject, you take this. Chemistry, you take. Entrepreneur must also be on the same level like this subject. This is what I'm pleading for, that let's not take it like an add-on. Let's also take it just like exactly how you wanted to take those core subjects, the way you wanted them to be taught. You can't just go and get somebody and say, you don't have enough subject, you want to teach chemistry. If somebody hasn't got a clue of this chemistry.
I think from speaking to you and from looking at the work you've done over your career, it's clear that you believe that there needs to be some kind of reform of the current curricula we have for entrepreneurship. And I think this particular community of practice is really emphasizing this culture of working in silos, this culture of working alone, individualistically. How do you feel collaboration will aid in this desire to really reform curricula and to not treat entrepreneurship, like you said, as an add-on?
Collaboration is the way to go, but to understand. And I'll tell you why I'm saying so, because with the case study that I did recently, where the students, they were really shocked that the students from applied sciences, food technology students were able to collaborate with the students from Faculty of Arts and Design. What is just important, we don't need to compete with each other, but we need to make sure that we complement one another, especially in terms of our career, in terms of what we are doing. When I was assisting the undergraduate students where they were turning their project into a startup, which I've got 5 startups from their project. Now, I had to take the guys that are doing branding and assist them with marketing and branding. The food guys, food technology students, could see that they really need the people from the Faculty of Arts for branding. They will also going to need somebody from marketing who can also assist with the social media. And I think when we do the curriculum of entrepreneur. These are the kind of things that one needs to put them together so that it cannot be an isolated thing. I mean, I can just give you an example. Let me just say, maybe you just said, teaching entrepreneur, you know that you will teach the skills, you will teach ideation, creativity, innovation. And you know, when you do this ideation, creativity, innovation, someone from us can also end up assisting in terms of that. You know, you will teach macroeconomics, you know, somebody from other can be able to assist. And then you will teach constitutional law or human rights that is related to entrepreneur. You know that someone from law can be able to assist. You will teach SMME, corporate governance as all, but you know there's someone from that can be able to. So you started to make sure that this is a collaborative. You cannot think that you as a faculty on your own, you can teach. You are also going to need other faculty that are also going to be able to teach the subject.
And my last question for today, how do you see your involvement as chair for the community of practice for entrepreneurship, aiding in teaching and learning around entrepreneurship, not just at your institution, but just generally in the HERESA network?
What I will want to say, that is my dream, and then I hope my dream will come true. We've got 26 universities, but I know that not all of them, they fall under the one that we've got it here for HERESA. I know for HERESA it's about 6. For the 6 that still, I'm not sure whether there's 6, but I know that 6 of them that are now under this. I want to see where we really, especially as a chair for HOP to assist in teaching and learning for entrepreneurship, where I'll be able to go to these universities, because I know, as a matter of fact, I know some of these universities, I know that they don't offer entrepreneur. They will say they're offering entrepreneur, and somebody will say offering MBA in entrepreneur. You can't do MBA in entrepreneur if you don't have a business. And I've seen students doing MBA in entrepreneur, and you said, what is your business all about? I don't have a business. I'll start the business when I complete the MBA. Or have you ever said something like this? But you're doing MBA in entrepreneur. And I think we need, and also those universities, they need to be open and honest that they need assistance, so that I can go and put the system in place, which I'm prepared with their assistant as well, because it's a collaborative effort, so that we can really have a proper modules that we can really assist our students when they do entrepreneur. And they need also to be open with themselves, the university, that they are trying, or they don't need to say, yeah, we are embedding it or doing this. And this is where I see myself playing a role, making sure that I do the road show, making sure that I give workshops to the other university, making sure that we share the best practices in terms of all this entrepreneur. And then at the end of the day, it's not about us, it's about the student. Those students, they are our client, if I have to talk that language. And you don't really want to have a client that when they are done, they won't be able to do anything about themselves.
Excellent. Professor Mudong, thank you so much for your time. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you soon with regards to your position as chair for this particular community of practice. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Kaya. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation as well.